Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Geezerology. Today, we're going to do a video in our series called New Music from Old Friends. But that title is a little bit of a misnomer because the music we're going to talk about today is from an old friend, but it's not new music. This is Neil Young going back into the vault to 2001 and releasing an album that he recorded 21 years ago, but never released. There's a little more convoluted explanation about what some of these tracks are, but Bob is here to talk about this album. He's listened to it a few times and he knows it. I listened to it once last night, but I didn't study it, so I don't know much about it, so I won't have much to say. But here's Bob to tell us all about the new old Neil Young album titled Toast. Take it away, Bob.
All right. Thank you, Scotty. So before we get started, I have to tell you that I dressed for the occasion, got my Neil Young t-shirt on. And going to have to confess up front, long-time Neil Young and Crazy Horse fan. So it's hard for me to be impartial because I love this band and I love Neil Young. And I love when these guys get together. They are primitive rock savants, and they just take us into a guitar-driven world that I revel in. So up front, Toast is not a bad album. It's not the best stuff that Neil Young and Crazy Horse have ever done, but it's worth listening to. I like it, but it's not Rust Never Sleeps. It's not Ragged Glory. You know, it's not Cortez the Killer or Cinnamon Girl level stuff, but it's not bad. So real briefly, the history of this. Neil Young went into the studio in 2001 with Crazy Horse and cut these songs. He never officially released the album, reportedly stating that he thought it wound up being too dark, too negative, and so he sat on it. And these songs reflect a time when Neil was going through some really bad times with his second wife. So there's a lot of stuff on here about unrequited love, failed relationships, things like that. So as I said, Neil sat on it. Interestingly, though, in 2002, he released an album called Are You Passionate that he recorded with Booker T and the MGs, you know, that soul band. And he used 4 songs from Toast and included them on Are You Passionate? And a couple of them, and 2 of them were retitled, so they have different titles than the songs that are on Toast, even though they are the same songs. Interestingly, there's one cut, Going Home, that appears on both albums, and it's a Crazy Horse song, and Neil just used it over again in Are You Passionate? Also, Frank San Pedro, longtime Crazy Horse guitarist, appeared on Are You Passionate? And so on Are You Passionate, these tunes kind of got a soul reworking, you know, with Booker T and the MG. However, on Toast, these songs all reflect that primitive rock from Crazy Horse and Neil. The opening track to Toast is a song called Quit, and it was included on both albums. And the versions are similar between the two. Quit has kind of a lilting melody. It's a ballad type song that opens the album. And it's got Neil singing verses in which he's pleading with a partner not to leave despite, you know, the things that the pain that he's caused her. Her reply, "Don't say you love me." And the 2 versions between the albums are similar. The Toast version has got a slightly darker recording to it than on Are You Passionate? Going Home is that Crazy Horse tune that was completely replicated on Are You Passionate? Quit, the opening track on this album, is probably the only slow tempo song. Starting with track number 2 and going through the rest of them, it's Crazy Horse kicking in with, you know, their hard driving rock. There are only 7 tunes on this album. However, the album clocks out at a total of like 51 minutes and 23 seconds. So the shortest song on here is 4 minutes and 10 seconds. So they're all fairly lengthy songs. We get a couple, one that goes over 10 minutes, another one over 13 minutes. So even though there's only 7 tracks, there's still a fair number, there's still a fair amount of music on here. How You Doing was retitled for Are You Passionate as Mr. Disappointment. The big difference between these 2 tracks is the way Young sings the lyrics. On Toast, he does his trademark Neil Young falsetto. However, on Are You Passionate, he falls into kind of a gravelly Tom Waits type delivery. Timberline, one of the songs that has never been released before, is an interesting cut. It's about a logger losing his job and then ultimately losing faith in God. And it mirrors Young's passion about ecological issues and also kind of where he was in a time frame of being in a really dark mood, you know, at the time of making this music. Here's an interesting little factoid. Gateway of Love, which is on Toast, was listed on the back of the Are You Passionate album, but was not actually included on the album. And the only place you ever heard it was used fairly often in Neil Young concerts, but this is the first time that it's ever seen a physical release. It's a 10-minute guitar workout. It's got kind of a little bit of a Latin rhythm influence in it, which is a departure from, you know, Crazy Horse's normal 4/4 time rave ups. The ending track on this album is Boom, Boom, Boom. It is 13 minutes of just raw Crazy Horse with lots of improvisation from Young and the band members. You've got some piano and trumpet that's included in the mix on this album. That song was included on Are You Passionate, but was retitled She's a Healer and cut back to about a 9-minute version. But here we get 13 minutes of Crazy Horse and Young, you know, just doing what they do best, which is primitive rock and roll with lots of guitar interplay. And, you know, this is in my love basket, you know, and I've always been passionate about Neil Young and Crazy Horse. And it seems to me that, you know, when Young goes off on some of his weird tangents, he always has to come back and hook up with Crazy Horse, you know, to refill those rock batteries that he's depleted. Overall, I think it's a good album. If you like Neil Young, you like Crazy Horse, you're going to find stuff here to like. There's some great guitar work. There are some songs with some decent lyrics. Some of them are a little weak. And you do get 3 songs that you would never have heard anywhere else before. One is called Standing in the Light of Love, the Timberline that I've always also previously mentioned, and Gateway of Love. So if you're a passionate Neil Young fan, you know 4 of these songs from the Are You Passionate album, which, by the way, is the album that gave us the song Let's Roll, which is Young's tribute to the passengers on United Flight 93 who overwhelmed the terrorists who had taken over that plane on 9/11. Anyway, it's definitely worth a listen. I wouldn't necessarily recommend dropping your hard-earned dollars to go out and buy a copy of it, but it's at least definitely worth checking out if you have a streaming service. And you may find that you like it enough, you know, to spend some money on it. It is, you know, classic Neil Young and Crazy Horse. Again, like I say, not their best material, but I think still worth at least one listen. I don't think you're going to be totally disappointed, but this Neil is kind of going through an interesting time right now. He's digging into his archives and just releasing stuff right and left. It's almost like Neil's in a race against his biological clock, you know, to get this material out here. So if you are a Neil Young fanatic, you're going to want to check it out. If you're a casual Neil Young fan, you could pass on this and still be satisfied with what you know about Neil so far. So that's my quick take on Toast. Not a bad album, but not anywhere Neil's best work. So.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, I gave it one listen last night, just just so I know what you're talking about when we recorded this today. And yeah, I had the same feeling. It was pleasant Neil Young and Crazy Horse stuff, but it was, if I want to listen to Neil Young and Crazy Horse, I'll go listen to one of those other two albums you mentioned, Ragged Glory, or even his most recent one, Barn, was a top-notch Neil Young and Crazy Horse album, right? When you were looking into this, was there any word now? Is Young one of the people who's sold all his catalog? I know Dylan did. There were a couple others that are. Was Neil Young one of those who did that?
I'm not 100% certain.
So it made me wonder if maybe he's like going back and releasing all this stuff, as to make his catalog more valuable for the purchaser or something. I don't know. I'm just completely guessing. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it just kind of made me wonder if that might be what's going on here. Okay, so you mentioned he was having problems at the time with his then wife, who was his second wife, and I noticed that on background vocals on this album is somebody named Astrid Young and somebody named Peggy Young. And then I went and checked, and also Are You Passionate? Those two people were also recorded with him on Are You Passionate? And this is all brand new to me. Astrid Young is his sister, who was a professional singer, has recorded, raised a couple of solo albums. And that was news to me when I went and looked into it. But more importantly, Peggy Young was his wife.
That's correct.
And and she was actually a fairly active singer-songwriter. I never knew that. Yeah, she's the one who established the bridge school with Neil Young, and they had a couple of kids who were sick with medical conditions, and they established this bridge school. And Peggy and Neil, I think they got divorced a few years after this album was recorded. I think somewhere in the late odds, I think or maybe it was in the mid-teens, I don't remember. And Peggy has since passed on. She died of cancer 3 years ago.
Yeah, they did make it through this rocky patch, but I believe it was 2014 when they ultimately got divorced.
Yeah, right.
Don't hold me to that date, but I think it was somewhere.
It was somewhere in there. It was a little while ago, but well after this album was recorded. Right. I know that. So that was just little tidbits of news to me. I never, I knew of Peggy Young, or I knew of Neil Young's wife, who established the bridge school with him, and they were married for a long, long time. I had no idea that she was also actually a professional musician, singer-songwriter.
Yeah, and I think I know they have one son named Ben, and I believe it's cerebral palsy that he has.
Right. They had two kids. They had two kids with cerebral palsy, and then a third kid with another condition. It's. Really,
I know that Neil got really involved in model trains, and I think part of it was kind of a therapy thing, for his son.
Right. Well, they established that bridge school to for a place for those kids to to be educated, and they did that for years and years and years. They did that annual concert, which was a benefit for the bridge school, right? But anyway, that just I just thought that was of note. I learned some new things about that I never knew before, so I wanted to share them with you.
Yeah, I've read a couple of Neil Young's books, and despite being what I think is a stellar musician, he's an interesting person, and has had a very interesting life, and has dabbled in a lot of things above and beyond music, and he was an early proponent of electrification of vehicles. He's a car nut. He's a train nut, and so he's got a lot of passions above and beyond music. He's an interesting individual.
Yeah, he also for a time was involved with that portable digital
Yeah.
music player that
Pogo, I
was
think, or Pong,
Pogo
yeah.
or yeah, some or what, yeah, whatever
Yeah.
that was called. That was supposed to be like
Mhm.
uh you know, for the to raise the quality of
Right.
digital music, but it just turned out that it was just too expensive for the
Right. Yeah,
marketplace.
yeah, I know
You know.
he had a major hatred for MP3 and such.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one final little trivia note on this album, reportedly based on the research that I did into it, when he and Crazy Horse went into the studio, he actually didn't have any material. So he wrote this stuff, you know, in the studio with Crazy Horse just kind of twiddling their thumbs, you know, waiting for him to come up with another song to do. So
He would do that a lot. I mean, it was, didn't that happen with the recent album Barn?
I
Wasn't
believe
that
the
was all
same thing
about?
happened. Yeah, yeah. He's
Yeah,
writing it sitting in the studio, and I guess
yeah,
sometimes it worked for him, sometimes it didn't.
yeah.
But
They're writing and recording it, and he discussed in the documentary that came out with Barn. He talked about that he got to a point in his career where he decided that he wasn't going to go in a studio and work things out and redo new takes and everything. He said because he always figured out when he got together with the guys in Crazy Horse, the first take was always the best take.
you know, and it works. But you know, if you really go back and be honest, there's a lot of repetition in the stuff that Young and Crazy Horse has done.
Well, they're just, yeah, a lot of the stuff is improvisation. You know,
Yeah,
it's like he's got a song structure and then they just kind of leave room to do their little guitar thing. They did a lot. And
you know, but
yeah,
you know,
and
they've
that's and essentially, I mean, my first listen on this album last night, that's what this sounds like. It's sort of in that same vein. It just sounds like they went into the studio and knocked out these tracks and they were done, you know. And then yeah, then he reworked a few of these for later albums and in a different style and everything like that. But Neil was good for that. He just liked
yeah.
to go in and put things down on tape and then walk away. And a lot of his albums, you know, that were proper albums, he would compile. He would say, okay, well, I have a couple of tracks that we did, you know, 2 years ago here or a year ago there. So a lot of his albums, they weren't actually albums that, you know, that were conceived or anything like that. It's just all of a sudden he realized he had a bunch of tracks that he hadn't done anything with, so he just pulled them together and put them together in an album. Right, that happened a lot with him.
Which makes
Uh,
Neil kind of interesting. You know, you
oh
never know what you're going to get.
yeah. He keeps you guessing.
Yes,
He
he
keeps you
does.
guessing.
Yeah.
This was actually conceived as an album. The recorded, they were all recorded at the same time during the same sessions over, you know, I don't know, over a week or however long it took at and at a recording studio in San Francisco. The name of the recording studio was Toast, and that's where the album title comes from. Anything else, Bob?
No, I think that's it. I just, you know, recap. It's worth a listen to. Don't expect brilliance, but it's definitely worth listening to.
Yeah, it's a decent Crazy Horse listen. I can tell you that from first listen. Okay, well, thanks again for listening, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Join us again next week for we'll probably have a roundtable on Tuesday, and another review of an album next Friday by one of us. And yeah, thanks for joining us. Talk to you later.
All right, take care.